When I go on site, I'd say 90 to 95% of businesses are doing oil analysis. So they're taking samples, they're sending them to a lab, they're getting results back. The problem is that those reports come back. Typically what happens is people look for red boxes or yellow boxes, and if the box is red, they probably just change the oil, and then that report gets filed away, never to be looked at again. And that's a real shame, because the value in oil analysis is actually in interpreting the results. And the good news is this is free, right? You've already spent all the money. All the money that is spent on oil analysis testing is actually spent on the actual bottle themselves. So they include the analysis in the cost of the bottle. Now, if data is the new oil, it's up to us to refine and distill that oil into something which is useful and practical. When I talk about oil analysis, I always like to align it with our definitions of different kinds of maintenance. So we have reactive, preventative, predictive, and proactive. Now, if we're going to give the analogy that oil is like the lifeblood of an asset, think about how you would take proactive measures to look after your blood. So you would eat a healthy diet, you would do lots of exercise. In terms of predictive maintenance, you could get regular cholesterol readings. Maybe you weigh yourself on a monthly schedule. Maybe you take blood glucose readings. And using that data, you can inform yourself to make different lifestyle decisions. Preventative would be going and getting open heart surgery on regular intervals. Obviously, the danger there is every time you open yourself up, there is a risk that you might die on the table. And that would be an example of over maintenance. And then you've got reactive, which is ultimately to wait until the asset fails. Now, when we're doing oil analysis, we're usually thinking in the predictive and the proactive domains. I always like to group the different results that you see on an oil analysis report by three different methods. You've got fluid condition, so information about the actual fluid itself. You've got contamination, which is telling you about contaminants that are in the fluid. And then you've got wear information. And if you had to broadly map these different types of information onto the predictive and proactive domain, you'd say that wear is predictive, so it's telling you about an impending failure. And then contaminants and fluid condition are more proactive. So we know, for example, that one of the causes of machine failure is contamination. So if we can measure that in advance and take action to, for example, filter out the contaminants, that is a proactive action. We can look at the fluid condition and then try to maintain the fluid. So let's get into step one, which is reading the report. Now, broadly speaking, all reports look much the same. They might be formatted slightly differently. So you've got a box up the information, which tells you about the sample information. As we tend to scroll down, you'll get information which is about the oil parameters, things like TAN, oxidation, nitration. You might get some information about what kind of oil it is. Now, these I would all bucket into fluid condition. Now, there's a couple of them which you could consider contaminants, because it'll usually give you information about things like water and soot, right? Those are contaminants, but for the most part, it's telling you about fluid condition. As you scroll down, it's going to start to give you some of the metals. These are typically associated with wear, might be one of the boxes, so that's obviously wear information. And then you've got some contaminants, which is obviously telling you about the fluid contamination. And then finally, you've got the additives, right? Now, these are obviously going to be telling you also about fluid condition, because additives deplete over time. Now, I should say that these boxes are imperfect, so they're approximations that the lab is making educated guesses on. So take calcium, for example. Calcium is often considered an additive because it's a detergent. However, if your site is on somewhere which is limestone rich, the dust that can contaminate your equipment will be made of lime, which is predominantly calcium. So calcium can also be a contaminant. So it's about being contextual to your particular application. Now let's start with level one, which is the traffic light analysis that I see most businesses doing. So on your report, you'll typically see a few red or yellow boxes which indicate that you are either approaching or have exceeded some kind of arbitrary limit. Now here's the thing about these limits. Most of them are preset. Sometimes the oil laboratory might set them based on some kind of OEM limits. So if you specify that you are using a Jenbacher gas engine, there'll be limits that are in the manual, and if your lab has read that manual and has loaded those results in, then they'll be able to tell you when you have exceeded the OEM limits. However, I would always encourage you to double check that. Sometimes they're standardized, so we might have rules of thumb which say above 50 parts per million iron, you should consider that an alarm. Sometimes they're statistical, so they'll take all of the different results and plot them on a bell curve, and they'll say, let's say 2 or 3 standard deviations away from the mean, we are going to set that as a limit. So that's kind of arbitrary. Or sometimes they're algorithmic. So if we're trying to detect the presence of coolant, for example, we might be looking for certain elements. Now, these are often accompanied by actionable comments, which will typically say, change your oil. The problem is that these are auto-generated and are rarely manually reviewed, because a lot of these laboratories are doing thousands, if not tens of thousands of samples per day, and therefore it's impractical for them to review them. This is kind of useful for a quick glance. So you look at your report, you see, is it red or is it yellow? And then maybe you do some triage about which assets you want to take a further look at. Now, I should say up front that one of the most important things that you should be looking at an oil analysis report is the viscosity. I've gone on and on in these videos about the fact that viscosity is the most important physical parameter of a lubricant. So the first thing that you want to check is the viscosity. Is it in grade, right? Has it varied very much? And if not, most of the time, that's going to mean that the fluid is doing a suitable job. And then after you check the viscosity, now we're going to look into the rest of the report. Now let's go on to level 2, which is to layer on an additional bit of interpretation. Now, the immediate place that most people jump to is the ICP metals. And this is where you've got all the different elements at the bottom of the page, which are arbitrarily broken up into wear contaminants and additives. Now what we need to do is we need to take our understanding of the application and we need to assess where could these metals have come from. This will help us troubleshoot. So if we see elevated levels of copper or of lead or of tin or of aluminium or of iron, we can make an assessment of where in the machine this could have come from. Now, there are some kind of rules of thumb. This is a table that I like to refer to often, which gives you some possible sources for all of the different metals. But these are not hard and fast rules. Sometimes you need to assess them together. So as an example, most dirt is composed of both silicon and aluminium. And so you would expect them to trend together if you are seeing contamination of your system. So both aluminium and silicon would potentially be going up and to the right. But in different places around the world, aluminium and silicon are present in different proportions in the dirt. So sometimes it'll be 1 to 2, sometimes it might even be 1 to 12. So the key is that you're going to have to look at the trend to see that they are actually going up together. Now, here's an example of where the traffic light analysis kind of falls down. So I give the example of Caltex Delo Gold Ultra tested at a local laboratory. So this is an engine oil, if you're not familiar. It's showing an alert for copper because copper is at 80 parts per million. And the recommendation is to check the crankcase bearings for damage. Now, checking the crankcase bearings for damage is not a trivial exercise, right? Crankcase bearings are right in the guts of the engine. So before you spend a whole lot of time, effort, and money on opening up the entire engine, we want to do a sense check, right? Do we really think it's the crankcase bearings? And here's the thing. What's missing from this analysis is an understanding of operational information. So in this particular case, which is a real-world case from one of my customers, what is missing from this analysis is that the oil coolers had been recently changed. And there's a process which I've talked about in these videos before, which is called passivation. And it's typically where the anti-wear additives, like ZDTP, chemically swap out for the copper until there is an inert layer that is developed on the inside of the exchanger. Now, this process is actually not particularly harmful to the engine, but it does point to the fact that this copper is not coming from the crankcase bearings. Now, this is not the laboratory's fault. There is no way that they could possibly know that you have changed an oil cooler. So this is where we need to apply a level of analysis and we need to meld operational information with the information that's coming from the laboratory. Now, one of the other reasons that the laboratory identified that the crankcase bearings are probably the source is because they see a little bit of elevated tin. Now, this is algorithmically determined, right? When they see elevated tin plus elevated copper, it points to the crankcase bearings. And that's because most of these shell bearings, right, have a steel backing. They might have some kind of soft copper alloy material, which is then separated from a flashing by a nickel barrier, and that flashing typically goes over the top, and it's often made of tin or something like that. So based on this information, the laboratory is making an educated guess. However, there are other sources of tin, brazing flux, for example, or soldering materials. So maybe if these are also present in the exchanger, that is the reason why you're seeing elevated tin. In some cases, there is no tin in the bearing. In some cases, there is no copper in the bearing. And so if you have that understanding and that awareness of the materials that are in your engine, you will again be able to make that evaluation. So when I instruct my clients, I basically tell them, in order to effectively interpret an oil analysis result, you need to put together the information you have, information about the test methods, information about the formulation, as well as records from ops or maintenance. Now let's move on to level 3, which is trend analysis. And this is where I would like every business to get to eventually. Now, trend analysis is where the oil analysis results really become powerful and we can get some really good insights. If we were to go back to our previous example, copper could trend up in one of two ways. It could be, in some senses, exponential, so the rate increases over time, or it could flatten out. Now, one of these is typical of corrosion, and the other one is typical of passivation, right? So corrosion is something that can affect engine bearings, where the acidity of the oil increases, and the problem is that corrosion tends to build on itself. You get corrosion of the bearing metal, which releases metal ions, which act as oxidation catalysts, which produces more acids, which produces even more corrosion, and so it accelerates. Passivation of something like a fresh copper oil cooler is something that slows down over time because you are slowly building an inert layer on the inside of the oil cooler, and so the rate decreases over time. Now, one of these is clearly more damaging for the engine than the other, and if we had only trended out the results over time, we would have been able to see this pattern. Now, there is actually some level of trend analysis which is usually provided with your oil analysis report. And that's typically shown off on the side where they'll chart out the results. These results can be very misleading for a trend because for the most part, what they do is they put them at regular intervals. Now take this result, for example. This would be an example of something which is seen on an oil analysis report. But now let's take a look at the sample dates, right? We have a 9-day interval followed by a 9-day interval, followed by a 3-day interval, followed by a 10-day interval. So to plot them all at regular intervals is not correct. It's not accurate. And so what we need to do is apply some thinking and some understanding about the application to plot versus engine hours, for example. And that would give us a much more realistic or kind of real-world representation of the results. The other mistake that people do in trend analysis is they tend to plot them linearly over time. So this, for example, would be engine drains, where you can see, for example, the oxidation increases and then it drops when we do an oil drain. We've got fresh oil in the system. Now, when you're doing this kind of analysis, it's very difficult to pick up on trends. But the good thing about oil drains is that they are repeatable data sets. So what we should be doing in an ideal scenario is actually plotting them over each other. Let's say that this is the typical way that an engine oil drain goes, where metals are slowly increasing over time. Now, if we plot the next drain over the top of it, and we see a deviation in this line or a deviation in this pattern, we can now identify the point at which a problem has occurred, which is leading to a failure. So going back to our understanding of maintenance, this would be an example of the initiation of P in the P to F interval. But it is only by trending these results over the top of each other that we are going to be able to analyze the trends. So I always encourage my clients, as much as possible, all the data that you have tested with your oil analysis laboratory, it is available. They have it stored in some kind of database. Generally, you'll be able to access that database, maybe through a web portal, or maybe you can simply ask the oil analysis laboratory to download all of your results in kind of an Excel format, where that's CSV or XLS. Take that data and just play around with it. Look for trends, look for insights. And it's only by putting all of this information together about the test methods, about the formulation, about your operational considerations, that you can really get a lot of value out of your data analysis.